Hey guys, Phil from Trail Talk MTB here, and today we're going to be reviewing the 2019 Merida 120 600. So the 120 is Merida's go-to do-it-all trail bike, and for 2019 it saw a complete redesign, still maintaining 120 mm of rear travel and 130 up front, but we've seen a slacker head angle, and then we've also seen an increase in reach, and then there's also a lower standover, which is very welcome over the last model. Specifically, the head angle is 67.3 degrees. On a size large, we've got a 455mm reach. We've also got a steeper seat angle, so 75.5, and then we've also got some moderate to short chainstays at 435mm. These were all big improvements over the last model, which had that really potent rear suspension, so the rear suspension definitely outperformed the geometry of the bike, so it was really begging for a bit more aggressive geometry, and it's good to see on the new bike. For me at 185cm, I rode the size large. At times it probably felt a little bit small, however I did feel very balanced in the bike, so it wasn't too much of an issue. I could possibly size up, however the seat tube is still pretty long considering the standover was reduced, so it would be nice to see maybe 5 to 10mm of reach, as well as the seat tubes shortened on each of the bikes. Other than that, the geometry is pretty dialed for a do-it-all rig. So I have the 600 model on for review. There is a few cheaper alloy models, and there's also the 800 model above in the alloy, which is also a good bike as well. And then you have some carbon frames as well. So there's plenty of options out there to fit all budgets as well. In terms of sizing, you have extra small to mediums in the 27.5 inch wheels, and then from medium to extra large, you have the 29 inch wheels. Starting with the suspension, you've got the RockShox sector up front. It's a big improvement over the old models. You've also got that debonair air spring, so it definitely feels a little bit plusher, a bit more supportive. However, it's not as sophisticated as the RockShox Revelation. However, at this price point, it's a really good fork. And then out the back, you've got the RockShox Deluxe RL, so you've got the lockout there as well as the rebound adjustment. Really good shock and works very well in this application. So onto the drivetrain, you've got full NX Eagle, so that 12-speed drivetrain. Really good to see at this price point. You've got an 11 to 50 tooth cassette, so plenty of range there. Doesn't shift as crisply as GX Eagle, however at this price point you can't really complain, and you get that pretty similar range to GX as well, only one tooth on the bottom end, so really good drivetrain at this price point. And then onto the brakes, you've got the Shimano MT500s. Really like these brakes, plenty of power on tap, and the feel's pretty good as well. These kind of more budget to mid-level Shimano brakes are really a high point in their line. Onto the wheels now, you've got Merida's own tubeless ready 29mm internal hookless rims. These are really good rims, never had any issues with them in the past, and really easy to set up tubeless. And then on the hubs, you've got Shimano Dior hubs. So big shift away from these cheaper models. Before, you used to get Joytech hubs, which did have a few warranty issues. So it's really good to see that Merida's spec'd these Dior hubs on these bikes for this year. Onto the tyres, you've got Maxxis Forecasters. Not a huge fan of these up front, however in the rear, it's a pretty versatile tyre, clears mud well and works pretty well in the dry. However, I would like to see a little bit more aggressive tyre up front because the bike is definitely very capable, and it's good to see that the higher models up have DHRs up front because I think this would be a great tyre. It's definitely lighter than DHF and offers pretty similar grip. And then rounding the package off, you've got Merida's house brand stuff. So you've got a 50mm stem, 760mm bars, so nice and wide. And then you've also got Merida's own dropper, which is essentially a Trans-X dropper. So now onto the setup of the suspension. So the bike utilizes Merida's float link suspension, which is essentially a linkage actuated single pivot where the lower shock mount pulls away as the top mount compresses the shock. In Merida's iteration, it feels pretty linear on most of their bikes, and it typically feels like it has a bit more travel than it actually does. So to start with, I ran around 30% sag in the rear suspension. I still felt like the bike pedaled really well in this setting, and there was still plenty of support for most people. So for most people, I would definitely recommend running around 30% sag. If you are more inclined to push the bike a little bit harder in more technical sections, then you could run less sag. So I ran around 25 to 27% sag. I still felt like the bike had that nice small bump compliance and opened up well on more technical climbs, so still tracked the ground really well. And there was still plenty of support and it was still plush enough. However, if you do like your suspension a bit more on the plush side in the first half of the travel, then you could run a volume spacer maintaining the 30% sag. For me, the 25 to 27% sag worked pretty well, and for me that was around 130 psi at my 83 kilos of weight. Now onto the climbing. So I was pretty shocked at how well the bike climbed considering the weight of the bike. So I weighed it first and it's just over 15 kilos. And when I took it for a ride, the first section was up a road and I was pretty shocked at how well it accelerated and how well it went up those climbs. So really impressed there. It's a decent level of anti-squat. When you sit in the saddle, it's nice and firm and you really motor up the climbs. When you do stand up, it is a little bit active. However, the rear suspension opens up really well over small bumps, so you got plenty of traction there on more technical climbs. And that steep seat angle really helps the bike as well. So that 75.5 degree seat angle is a real bonus on this bike. So now onto the descending, the fun part. If I was to describe the bike in one sentence, it descends just as good as the 140, how it maintains that playful nature of a shorter travel bike. The 67.3 degree head angle is perfect for a bike like this. It definitely balances climbing ability with descending, and it really is a bike that you can do anything from XC to more lighter enduro trails. Like with the climbing, the rear suspension is a real highlight here. It's nice and linear and supportive through the whole stroke, which is aided by the long stroke and low leverage ratio. The float link suspension works a treat in eating up rocks and decent sized hits with a lot of control, and there is a nice little bit of progression towards the end. It comes in very smoothly to the point I never really felt any harsh bottom outs. Something I've really enjoyed on all Merida bikes lately. So I have a little clip here that really showcases the performance of the rear suspension. So it's a nice slow-mo footage, and there's 3 successive square edge hits. So you really see how the bike tracks the ground very well through these sections. A lot of other short travel bikes in this section tend to skip across, when you can really see how the Merida's rear suspension tracks the ground very well. I know it's a bit of cliche when you hear this, but the bike definitely does feel like it has a bit more travel than it actually does. The float link suspension does this on most bikes, and the Treks tend to feel this way too. So you really feel like you got a bit more travel, so it feels more like 130 millimeters of travel as opposed to the 120. Where the 120 really differs from the 140 and the 160 in the Merida lineup is that it still has that ability to be able to be pumped around hard and get rewarded with free speed on every feature out on the trail. It's seriously quick. It's definitely one of those shorter travel bikes that can lure you into a false sense of security. The rear end is so capable and you can go so fast and you can just mow through these rock gardens, but it comes to a point where you hit a wall pretty abruptly. The shorter reach and head angle definitely will let you down before the rear suspension will on this bike, but you do hit that wall pretty quickly, so you just need to be careful, stay within your limits, but the bike definitely can be pushed beyond what you think a 120mm bike can be. Another highlight of the bike is the way it corners. You do feel really balanced on this bike. It is a bit shorter by modded standards, but you are very central and you are very balanced. You can rail berms without much effort, and I never felt like I had to move around the bike that much to get much grip. The balance was really good front to rear. It is a pretty versatile trail bike, so if you do prefer the faster flowy things with a few jumps, it will definitely give you plenty of support to push against those things, and it jumps really well. But if you prefer more techie trails, that 67 degree head angle and that rear suspension will get you out of trouble in most situations. So it is really capable and it's a really good all-round bike. So onto a few limitations. As you can tell, I really like the bike, so there isn't much to talk about here. I do feel like a little bit extra in the reach wouldn't be too much of a negative, so 5 to 10 millimeters and then maybe a couple of millimeters on the chainstay. I don't think it would detract too much from the all-round nature of the bike, but it would provide you that little bit more confidence when you really want to push the bike, because it is very capable. It would also be nice to possibly reduce the standover even further as well as the seat tube, giving the opportunity for people to size up if they really did want to. And then I'd also like to see a more aggressive front tire on the bike. It's good to see that the higher models have a DHR on the front, because I do think that the bike really justifies it. And even on these cheaper models, something a bit more aggressive and maybe something in the dual compound, so a little bit harder, but it would give you a bit more grip, because the bike definitely really needs it up front. So now into some conclusions. As you can tell, I really like the bike. It's been really refreshing to ride a short travel trail bike for a while, and it really is fun. These bikes are super capable these days, and they put the fun back in riding. If you're riding just general trail riding, you're there to have fun. You're not there to be crazy, be super fast or anything like that. That's what enduro bikes are for. So it really does put the fun back in riding these shorter travel bikes, and they are super capable. You can push them a bit more than you used to be able to. If I were to describe the bikes in 2 words, the first word would be fun, and the other word would be balanced. The bike does corner very well. You feel very central in the bike, and you can rail berms with ease. What kind of rider would this bike suit? So It will suit anyone that rides XC to lighter enduro trails, so anyone who's doing just general trail riding. That's why you want this kind of bike. You want a bike that you can really do everything on, from XC to lighter enduro stuff. For me personally, that wants to push their bike a little bit more, I can definitely see some people putting 140 millimeters of travel up front. You still have a pretty steep seat angle there, so it wouldn't detract too much from that there. And the rear suspension is capable enough to handle that. It is nice to see the DHR up front on some other models, and if it were my money, I would probably go the 120-800. You get that DHR up front, you get the Revelation, so nice stiffer fork, and it feels a bit plusher. You've also got the KS-Lev dropper post, and then to top it all off, you've got the GX Eagle drivetrain. So if that were my money, I would definitely go with the 800. If you enjoyed the view, don't forget to drop a like and also subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll get around to answering them. Thanks for watching.